It was late that night when I realized he wasn't coming home. I stood at the window, staring out at the dark street, and my heart sank into a place I hadn't known existed. I wasn't angry, not really. No, I was just so deeply sad. There had been a time when I'd hoped, when I'd waited for that knock on the door, for his footsteps on the porch, for the sound of his voice. But tonight, standing there in the quiet, I knew with a kind of certainty I couldn't shake, he wasn't coming back. I know it sounds strange, but there was a certain peace in that realization. After all, I had waited for so many years. I had lived in a constant state of hope that one day he would return. I thought it would come. I thought that time would heal everything, that we would be able to sit at the table again, laugh about old stories, and find our way back to each other. But tonight, it wasn't like that. Tonight, I knew the truth. He was gone, for good. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, a little lost. I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the years that had passed, and all the broken pieces of our family. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, though it left an emptiness that felt heavier than I had expected. We were a small family, once so close, or at least that's how I remember it. There were 4 of us, myself, my husband, and our 2 children. And of course, there was him, our son, James. I remember the day he was born, like it was yesterday. His tiny hands, his little cries, the way he looked up at me as if he knew he was meant for something big. He was always a sensitive child, and I tried to nurture that part of him, even when it wasn't always easy. His father, well, he wasn't as patient. He was the strong, silent type, the kind of man who believed in showing love through hard work and silence. But I knew James needed more than that. He needed words, encouragement, and affection. Looking back, I realize now that I probably tried to overcompensate for my husband's quiet nature. Maybe that's why James always seemed a little distant from us. He was quiet too, but there was something about his silence that worried me. When he was younger, he'd come to me with all his little fears and dreams. But as he grew older, he became more withdrawn. I could feel him slipping away from me, but I wasn't sure why, and neither was he. When he left for college, I thought maybe it was just part of growing up. The day he left, I tried to give him a hug, but he just patted my back and said, "I'll be back soon." Those words should have comforted me, but somehow they didn't. And looking back, I should have seen it. I should have known that those words were more like a goodbye than a promise. Years went by, and the visits became less frequent. The phone calls grew shorter, and then, one day, there was nothing at all. No calls, no messages, no visits. My heart ached in a way I hadn't known was possible. His father didn't seem to notice much. He would say, "He'll come around, May. Don't worry about it." But I knew it wasn't just about him coming around. Something had changed, and I couldn't understand it. I tried to reach out. I sent letters. I left voicemails. I even went to visit him once, but he wasn't home. And when I asked the neighbors, they told me he'd been distant, that he wasn't really part of the community anymore. That was the first time I felt the weight of what was happening. My son, the one I had raised with so much love, was slipping away from me in a way I couldn't stop. But still, I waited. And it wasn't until a few years later that I got a call from him. He was living in a small apartment in another city. He told me he was doing well, that everything was fine, but there was something in his voice, a distance, a coldness, that told me it wasn't true. We didn't talk much about his life, or the reasons he'd stayed away for so long. It was almost like we were strangers, trying to remember who we were to each other. I tried to get him to visit, to come home for a holiday or a weekend. He'd always give me excuses. Work, school, friends. But I could feel it. He didn't want to come back, and I didn't know why. There were so many things I wanted to ask him, so many things I needed to say. But I never did. I didn't want to push him away any further. So I waited, and I waited. And then came the day I received the letter. I'll never forget the way the envelope felt in my hands. It was thick, heavier than usual. My heart dropped the moment I saw it. There was no return address, but I knew. I just knew it was from him. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling, and as I read the words, my stomach twisted with a cold, hard feeling. James had written me a letter to explain himself. He told me he had been struggling with things, personal things he couldn't share with me at the time. He said he was sorry for the way he had treated me, that he had pulled away because he didn't know how to talk about his feelings. But what really hurt was the last part. He said he didn't think he could come home again. Not like before. Not ever. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the words. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe what I had just read. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't coming home. The door that had once been open between us was now closed. And no matter how much I wanted to open it again, no matter how much I wished I could, it wasn't going to happen. I tried to tell myself that it was okay, that maybe this was just part of life, that children grow up, they move away, they become their own people. I tried to convince myself that he was happy, that he was living the life he wanted. But the truth was, I couldn't shake the emptiness inside of me. I couldn't stop wondering where we went wrong. I remember one night, a few weeks after I'd gotten the letter. I was sitting alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. My husband was out, probably at the bar, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I stared out the window, watching the rain fall softly against the glass, and I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of loss. I hadn't realized how much I had depended on the idea of him coming back. I had let myself believe that one day everything would be okay again. But that night, I finally understood. The door had closed, and it wasn't going to open again. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, unsure of what I even wanted to say. After a few rings, I heard his voice. "Hello? James," I whispered. "I just wanted to hear your voice." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." And then, as if he could sense what I was feeling, he added, "I don't know when or if I'll be able to come back, but I want you to know, I haven't forgotten you." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should cry, if I should yell, or if I should just let it go. I said goodbye quietly, and hung up the phone. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter anymore. The days went by, and somehow life continued. I kept going through the motions, doing what I had always done. I cooked dinner, I cleaned the house, I worked in the garden, but inside, I felt like a part of me had gone missing. It wasn't until a few months later that I saw him again. It wasn't a grand reunion. It wasn't the dramatic moment I had dreamed about. No, it was much simpler than that. One evening, I got a knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was, James, standing there a little older, a little different, but still my son. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Regret. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly. "I should have come back sooner. I didn't know what to say. I didn't need to say anything. I just wrapped my arms around him and held him close. And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes we don't get the closure we want. Sometimes the answers don't come. But love has a way of finding its way back, even when it feels lost. We didn't talk much about the past after that. We just lived in the present, trying to make up for the time lost. And though things were never quite the same, they didn't need to be. I learned that sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that things don't always go the way we expect. But in the end, the love we share is always there, waiting for us to find it again. And maybe that's the lesson I learned. No matter how far we drift, no matter how long we wait, love will always find a way back. It might not come the way we imagined, but it will come. It always does.